Quiet on set. Picture is up. All right, roll sound.
Rolling.
Roll cameras.
Cams rolling.
And 3, 2.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to Hank's Think Tank. Guess what? Got Mark Hogan on my left.
Howdy, everybody.
Good to have you back in, bro. It's been a little while
Thanks.
since we've done one of these, so I'm happy to have you in.
It's a great show to get back with, too.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. We have Vlad DeBriansky.
That's correct.
He is from Ukraine, and what we're going to do is we're going to unpack this whole situation and try to figure out where we are as a country, where Ukraine is as a country, where Russia is as a country. And I think it needs to start with kind of a little bit of history in order for us to really understand this. And what I'd like to do first is let Vlad to introduce himself and kind of tell us where he's from, how he got here, and we'll just go from there. So stay tuned, man. This is going to be a good one. Welcome aboard, Vlad.
Thank
how
you.
are
Welcome.
you?
Glad
Good to see
I'm
you.
good. I'm good. In good spirit, though.
Fantastic.
Well, I was born in Ukraine, in the western part of Ukraine. I grew up there, but I also grew up in Siberia in Russia when I was about 7 years old. For 3 years, we lived there with a family. Then we came back. I went to college in Ukraine. I finished my master's in rocket science, basically. Short say.
Wow.
And then I got invited to Berklee College of Music in Boston to attend study there, and I studied in Boston. Then I couldn't leave the States going back to Europe because I had the Soviet Union passport, and the Soviet Union no more, and I got stuck in America.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I was one of those people. Maybe you've seen a movie with Tom Hanks, how he's stuck at the airport.
Right.
Well, that's basically happened to me.
Wow. So this is right at the breakup of the Soviet
Yeah,
Union.
yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't have any passport, so basically I was stuck in the States with nothing. I was a human being without any citizenship.
Wow.
And then music took me to studios in New York City. I lived in New York City, and eventually I signed the contract as an artist for a recording company, and made my recordings, and I had multiple albums. Several albums were top of the charts. And then I became a producer. I moved to Los Angeles. I lived in Los Angeles for 20 years. And then produced many artists. And made music and still do. And then, I'm a jazz and blues guitarist, so I have that going on, plus producing. And then in 2010, I got approached by Berklee College of Music to spearhead sort of like a branch, an office in Eastern Europe to bring the jazz and blues studies there.
Okay.
And at first I thought Warsaw in Poland, then Sweden, then St. Petersburg in Russia. But I wasn't really interested, let's say that. Like, I like to educate people in music and I have my own method, but didn't trigger for me. But then in 2014, what happened is that Russia annexed Crimea and imposed the proxy war in Donbass, in the eastern part of Ukraine.
Right.
Through their sort of called rebels, let's say that. And and that kind of triggered me to do something for Ukraine. The heart ached. And I went there. I went there and I said, hey, I want to open a school. I put my own money. I did the whole thing myself. And, in 2 years we became a successful school there. And we had graduates, and some of the graduates became stars, and so on and so forth. A lot of them moved to the States because they offered scholarships for top schools here after what we'd done there. And we continued there. And I was sharing my time between Los Angeles and Kyiv from 2014 until 2017. Then in 2017, I moved fully to Kyiv because I married a Ukrainian woman.
Okay.
Everybody should. And then we opened a new branch, and I was just there in February, opening a bigger school with investors, and we were about to announce our new curriculum and new semester. And my wife and I sort of decided, all right, so let's move from Los Angeles to Texas because we wanted to move to Texas for a couple of weeks and then go on the 26th of February to Ukraine. Unfortunately, on 24th, I got phone calls that the Russian rockets, ballistic missiles, are bombarding every major city in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously that's changed everything.
Right. So, and it's been hard for us to disseminate what's true, what's not. We get a lot of
We
information.
get a lot of agenda-driven news. You just got to take with a grain of salt.
Right. And so what I'd really like to do is kind of get an idea, because I'm stuck between two schools of thought.
Mm-hmm.
Is Putin trying to rebuild the old USSR, or does he really have an issue and a fear that NATO is at his back door?
Well, you see,
would that be the reason why he's moved so aggressively into Ukraine, or is there another agenda that we don't even know about?
His true agenda is confuse you.
Okay.
And that's exactly what you said. I'm not sure what to think. That's exactly his goal. That's exactly what his goal is. It's the goal of every KGB trained guy. Even when I was in school, I was an A student in Soviet Union, right? So obviously they put me out of the crowd because they thought I'm going to be the next somebody for them. And I've been told these things, these methods, that there is no black and white, there is gray.
Okay.
Right? In order to confuse, in order for people not to take sides, right? This way, they are free to go and do whatever they want.
As long as they can plant a little seed of doubt in there, push you one way or the other.
Exactly. So it's basically, the confusion is the key, and God is replaced by the leader, right? Like Communist Party, let's say, right? And the ideology of those people is the main weapon, the main thought, the main heart, how they live, right? And the ideology of Putin is nothing else but Bolshevik. He's a KGB guy. He grew up in Soviet Union. He was trained in KGB schools in Germany, in Dresden, and then in St. Petersburg, obviously. And St. Petersburg, that's where the NKVD KGB started, right? And I was in St. Petersburg when I was a boy in the 80s, and I remember we met with my family. My family was prosecuted by the KGB, My family is from priest family, and Stalin basically sent all my family members to Caucasus. At that time, that was like a popular destination for the repression for the priests, right? So I know this firsthand, right? And Putin is one of those guys. If you probably notice, I lived in the States for 30 years. And if you noticed, when Putin came to power, sort of everything's changed here as well, right? There are no news. CNN is kind of confusing you a little bit. There's a lot of information in colleges that's not really capitalistic anymore, right?
Right.
A lot of things kind of moved here and there, and there's a lot of gray areas, and then people start to argue, right? Well, that's the goal. The goal is that what I call civilization, the game to the civilized world, means order, values, the way we respect each other, and the way we make the world a better place, right? It's going to be confused now, because what's a better place? Well, this guy says differently, and this guy says differently. That's the goal of propaganda. The KGB is the master of it. I said this, and I will say it many, many times. The propaganda, it's not the bullets that kill, it's the propaganda that kills. Because the gun itself doesn't do anything. You have to have a human being with a gun. And the human being has a brain, and the propaganda tells him what to do. So that's what propaganda is. And actually, you said this thing about that you confused. I got bombarded on my Facebook and my Tube, obviously by the Russian bots, but not just that, with credible people from Australia, from New Zealand, from here, from England, and saying, "Look, it's all good, Putin. You don't understand." They're telling me, my family's getting bombarded.
You don't understand.
I don't understand. Putin is taking out the deep state, right, out of Ukraine.
Right.
So that's what they're telling you. So and that's the propaganda that was going on for 20 years, for 22 years since Putin is here. Before that, it wasn't that. Like, have you heard a term, a deep state, before?
Yeah, absolutely.
You haven't. You haven't heard things like capitalism, socialism before? No, you didn't. So all of that stuff gets confusing. People don't understand that they call Sweden socialism, even though it's capitalism, or Norway, the same ways. So people are confused because that's the confusion. And again, the capitalist society think that the whole law goes around the capital. So the private property, the way you create things, right? The value of your work, it's all capital, right? Where in the ideology of Bolsheviks, it has nothing to do with that. The ideology of Bolsheviks is about we are right, you are wrong, and live like us. That's it. They don't need capital. And by the way, if you go to Russian news right now, it's like a flash mob right now there, that all the girls, like 20s and 30s, they go to Zara, for example. They buy stuff and throw it in the bucket. So we don't need this capitalist stuff. So it just, for them, it's like oil into the fire. Yeah, give me more of that, right? So that's the idea. That's exactly what I'm telling. That Putin, it has nothing to do with Soviet Union. It has nothing to do with sanctions or money or anything like this. It has to do with ideology. And if you go back with that ideology, you go back to Marx, because that's where KGB takes their roots from. Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, Putin. It's the same line. I mean, it's not changed. You know, my wife and I, we went to Moscow, I think about 7-8 years ago, something like that. They invited us because they wanted to open American Music Academy through me there. And I didn't know it was a KGB who came to me. And they had budget from Putin's office to create sort of a legitimate cultural layer for the education, for the kids. They will think hey, we have the same thing as there, but this is our guy who's doing this, because they called me our guy. Right? So when we refused, they couldn't believe it. How is that? I was born in Ukraine and I'm not their guy, right? So a lot of that happened, and we were there during, I think it was 7th, 8th, and 9th of May. Now, 9th of May for Russia, as in Soviet Union, it was the victory day from the World War II. Even though in Europe it's the 8th of May. Right, and it's called the Victory Day of World War II. In Russia, it's called the 9th of May, and it's called the Victory Day for our motherland war. It's a little bit different.
Okay.
Right, and we went there, and we couldn't believe it. You see, this Mercedes we were in Moscow, and Moscow is like Las Vegas, so to speak, right? And you see these kids with families and mom and dads and everybody's walking on streets with uniforms from the Soviet Union in the 1940s. And they were walking with that and kind of remembering the people who died during the war, but at the same time they had things like, for example, we can repeat this again. Everybody. So, and that was preparing the public, the Russian public, like, hey, the West is there, we're going to watch them and we're going to fight them.
So this has been going on a long, long time then.
Yes, I think it happened since Putin came to power. If Putin didn't come to power, if Yeltsin stayed there, I think it wouldn't be this way. But Putin is a KGB guy. Again, you get the trail there. And he's the guy who truly is upset with the West. He is the guy who's trying to deliver the end game for Lenin's idea, for Marx's idea. He's not afraid anymore. The gloves are off.
So really it has nothing to do with Ukraine?
No. It has nothing to do with Ukraine. It has to do with him against the West. That's it. And I'll tell you more if you want me to say that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the Bolsheviks and the Nazis started from the same root.
Okay.
Right. From Germany, as we know it, right? And the communists, basically, what's here called communist, we call it Bolsheviks. Bolshevik in Russian means the majority. Mensheviks means the minority.
Okay.
So they call themselves Bolsheviks as a majority, right? But they're communist in a sense, right? But not in a good sense, because the communal idea is kind of a utopian good idea, kind of the hippies and all that, right? Mm-hmm. But this has nothing to do with this, right? The Marx idea was that the capitalism is pure evil, basically.
Right.
Right. Marx and Engels, right? Who people don't know, check them out. They were philosophers from France who were self-hated Jews, it's called. Right, and they hated everything about the capitalism. The capital, they hated everything about private property. They hated everything about delivering the goods, or, for example, value humans' work.
Right.
They didn't believe in that.
They didn't believe in individualism and
Nothing
freedom of thought, because you go off on your own thing. And
that's already a byproduct of that. That was kind of written by Lenin and everybody else, but the fundamental idea that the enemy is the money, right? The enemy is the production of goods in exchange for money. Mm-hmm. The enemy is value your work, right, for money, right? That's the enemy, because they thought this is fundamentally wrong, right? Of course, there is no fundamental ideas. There's nothing that in the Bible. There's nothing this anywhere, right? He just created this idea, right? And obviously, it flew with the very poor people, right? The very poor people said, "Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't have any money. I don't have to work.
Right.
Why do I have to work? I don't have to money. I don't have to do anything. I should get stuff." So the idea of Marxism was, give me that for free, right? Very kind of rough saying, right?
Sure.
So, of course, all that individualism, the freedom, and exploring your potential and making sure that you're happy, the pursuit of happiness, that is irrelevant to Marxism, because it has nothing to do with the fundamental idea, finding a common enemy. And the common enemy was the capital. So the organizing people around the common enemy makes a powerful ideology, right? Nobody, like even now in Russia, nobody thinks about freedom. You can ask them, it's like, what? We don't understand what that is.
Really?
Right? Of course not. Of course not.
Huh.
They don't know. They'll say, we are going to fight the West because the West is an enemy. That's all they're going to say. Mm-hmm. They're not going to say, oh, do I lose my freedom? What is freedom? What does that mean? How is that to find your own potential? What is that to be happy? Right? Nobody knows that in Russia. Nobody taught them this. See, that's a difference.
That's hard for me to wrap my head around, because it just seems so fundamentally innate.
Yes.
You know, to want freedom and to be able self-discovery, and I mean, it just seems innately human.
Well, I'll tell you what's really scary is that has taken root on the American colleges and the young people in particular, the American left, if you want to say that. Freedom is selfish. Capitalism is bad. I mean, you've got bands of people out there that are promoting that idea. You know?
But I would say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would say it's not just the left, the right as well. And speaking of that, for example, if you go, it's not about politics I'm talking right now, but let's talk about the politics, for instance. So, since Obama was in the office, then Trump, now Biden. If you look at what's left, what's right, it's constantly changing right now.
Right.
Like for example, people who tell me that, hey, yeah, let's go Putin and take the deep state out of Ukraine. These are the extreme right. Mm-hmm. It's not the left saying this, but they're supporting the Bolshevik. Mm-hmm. See, that's the confusion that I'm talking about.
Yeah, the roles have been reversed.
They always do that.
Right.
They always do this. And it's not about the left or right. It's about the confusion. And the more people are confused, the easier for Bolsheviks to do their dirty work.
Right.
That's all it is. And for America, the best way to do is just think of the value of what is freedom, as you said, individual freedom. What is the capital? Why we have capitalism? Right? Why do we have this? And concentrate on those values rather than who's right and who's wrong, because that's exactly what Putin does and KGB does. For example, if you create a common enemy as a Nazi, you just call somebody a Nazi. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a common enemy because it's a boogeyman,
Right.
right? It's easy. Or let's say this. I'll say something. Let's imagine I'm KGB. Well, you know what? America went to kill innocent people in Iraq. And we know it's innocent. We know there was no chemical weapons or biological weapons there. So America is bad. That's it. I just said the KGB line. Right? And it's easy for the left and to the right to agree. Right? So that's what I'm saying. Putin wants to have left and right. Do you know that in Russia there is no left and right? There's no left and right. There's a center.
Right.
That's all it is. And that's how dangerous it is. And if you left and right, obviously it's less of us and more of him.
So what about the Ukrainian position then?
Yeah.
Where are they at on this? I mean, it seems like they would be angry at the West also, because if Putin's ideology is just to rid the globe of Western ideology,
Yeah.
then it seems like, and now Ukraine has become the victim of that. It seems like they'd be angrier than anyone.
Well, what happened in Ukraine is kind of interesting because Ukraine independence. Well, first of all, let's make sure there's a little bit of history lesson. Ukraine as a state is an ancient sovereign state, right? 1,500 years old as a state. As
Okay.
people even older, right? If you go to museum in natural history in New York City and you see where the first homes were and hearths and all of that and blueprints of houses and engineering, that was Ukraine, right? And that dates 15,000 BC. That's what it's 17,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an ancient people, but as far as state, it's 1,500 years old. It lost its statehood during the attack of the Huns, of the Mongol Tartars in 12th century, and Kyiv was burned. That's how Ukrainians made Lviv it's Western Ukraine as the capital, and Danilo Halitsky was the king of that state. After that, one of the princes from the Kyiv kings was ousted from the kingdom because he was trying to get the throne and all that stuff, as we know from the history. So that was common. And he went to the Mongol Tartars at that time, and they established what's called Moscow. And Moscow, Kremlin, right? And that was a first state for them, state slash city slash castle.
Okay.
Right. And they were fighting against the Ukraine at that time. Right. And Ukraine with Poland later on in 14th century, they got united in Rzeczpospolita. That was a big country. And nobody was basically attacking Ukraine then, even though a lot of Russians don't like to admit it. Moscow was conquered by Polish king. And it was Poland at some point. I'm sure the Russians who are listening are mad right now, but if you go to Wikipedia, you'll be surprised. So, and then actually he even adopted the Slavic name Vladimir because it was a king. He has to be a Vladimir,
Okay.
right? And so Moscow was not a powerful state by any means, but they were kind of hooligans, if you will, right? And they were paying the tax to the Huns until Ivan the Terrible, right? And we're talking already 16th century. So Ivan the Terrible was the beginning of what's called Russian statehood, right? It wasn't called Russia, it was called Moscovia, Moscow state in English. And until later, which was in 17th century, Peter the Great came to power, that's how Russia was established. So we're talking about 400 years of Russian state versus 1,500 years of Ukraine, right? Obviously, a lot of wars came through, a lot of terror attacks, I guess, from Mongol Tatars and then modern Russia, what we call it, right? Then Catherine the Great, being a German, she became queen of Russia, which it was Tsar and Tsaritsa at that time. And she did pogroms in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, even though Cossacks were fighting them off, but then they made a deal with Cossacks.
And people that don't know what a pogrom is, that's a cleansing or a purge
it's
of
a purge
opposition.
of a nation, or
Yeah.
a purge of a military kind of people and so on. Basically, it's a purge. Pogrom in Russian means to destroy.
Yeah.
And then Nikolai I and Nikolai II did pogroms in Kyiv for the Jewish people. And a lot of Jews know about that, right? So that was the short history. So what happened with Ukraine? And in 1918, Ukraine became independent during the Russian Revolution for a year. Then the Bolsheviks came and took the power. But the Western Ukraine was not under Soviet Union until 1939, when Nazi, along with Soviet Union, divided Poland. Right, that was a division. A lot of actually Ukrainians ended up in Poland because of that, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the World War II as we know it, and then from 1946, Ukraine was officially part of the Soviet Union, Western and Eastern Ukraine, until 1991. In 1991, Soviet Union collapsed, and with a referendum, Ukraine was independent. So Ukraine's independence in modern day is 31 days.
Yeah.
31 years, I'm sorry.
Okay. But it's been going on for a long, long, long time.
Yeah, it's a confusing history, but at the same time, you have to realize that Kyiv was the major influence in culture in Europe before 12th century, right? Mm-hmm. The first Queen Anne of France was the daughter of Yaroslav, the king of Kyiv. So it's the same with Netherlands, Germany, Belgium. So a lot of that I'm sure that Europeans know, but Americans don't.
Yeah.
Right. And then Russians don't want to. Right. So it's a propaganda again, because obviously the ones who want to win the war, they want to make sure people read the right theory.
Right.
You know.
So when we get to what's going on right now.
Okay. Well, what happened? So in 2004, there was what's called Orange Revolution. You probably heard of that. Mm-hmm. Ukraine had a problem with the president, with the legitimate president. So a guy called Yanukovych, right, and another guy called Yushchenko were going for president seat. And people voted for Yushchenko, but the election was rigged, and Yanukovych won. People went on streets. And said, we don't believe this, and it was called what's called Orange Revolution in 2004. Yushchenko won at the end of it. Then in 2008, again, the new presidential election, and Yanukovych won. And when Yanukovych won, before that, the Ukrainian direction of development was written constitution, which is a European.
Okay.
And the direction was to get into European Economic Union first, mm-hmm. and then to European Union. And until 2013, that was going by plan. But then all of a sudden, the Prime Minister and the President says, no, we're not going to sign that. 2013. People on the streets. What do you mean? Especially the youth. They want to be in Europe. They want to be having fun in bars and having education and all that stuff. So nobody wanted to go back to Soviet Union part. So, and they went on the streets. And that's when things started to go wrong, right? In fact, I came to Ukraine, to Kyiv in November 2013 to kind of see what's going on. And a friend of mine, a famous singer, Ruslana Lezhitschka, and she was there on the kind of a main speaker on the stage there. And I spoke to her a lot. And then I went to see the ambassador because I'm an American citizen. So I wanted to make sure that I'm safe. And I wanted to make sure what can I do. Mm-hmm. His name was Jeffrey Pyatt. And and he explained to me what was going on and how Yanukovych didn't want to sign this and da. And well, it was all a stage. It was a world stage, I should say this. And at one point, everything broke because the police started to shoot at people, right, and killing people. Now, I'm pretty sure it was Putin people. I'm pretty sure, in order to make that disaster, in order to take the Crimea, to impose all that stuff. But at that time, nobody knew who and why they still can't find it, you know. So that disaster happened, Then in 2014, Crimea was annexed. Then Donbass was a disaster. The Russian colonels came, and Russia says there is no Russian army, and I saw that. Even Jeffrey Pye, the ambassador, he goes to CNN and says, "Oh, it's a war. Russia is doing the war in Ukraine."
Mm-hmm.
And the anchor at CNN says, "Oh, no, that's your opinion. We don't think so." So it was a setup. Even though whatever you see on the ground, the CNN didn't want to say,
Mm-hmm.
because I think CNN had a directive. That's what I think.
Well, I think the mainstream media has a directive for sure.
So and that's what happened, and 15,000 people died in eastern Ukraine that time. My wife is from eastern Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of my friends, and I opened a school later, and a lot of my employees were from eastern Ukraine, and they lost their houses. The Russians came and just said, "Give it to me," like Bolsheviks, "Give it to me," right? And they moved to Kyiv and lived there. And this kind of installed conflict. That's what Russians do. They did it in Georgia, they did it in Moldova, they did it in Syria. They do this everywhere in order to make sure that the country will never be prosperous, right? Or join NATO, for example, or join European Union, or do whatever they want, right? So that's their method. And so that's what happened. That's how Ukraine sort of first had a sense, something's going to happen. So obviously, Russia's army didn't withdraw from Crimea or from Donbass, right? They wanted to make sure that Ukraine signs a Minsk agreement. A Minsk agreement is basically giving up Donbass and Crimea forever,
Mm-hmm.
right? And more maybe, because it's basically they want to do a federation out of Ukraine, right? And that president that was Petro Poroshenko, who was elected during the war, and it's a little bit questionable to me how he was elected, because it was fast and probably was helped by American government, I'm sure. But he was a pro-Western guy. No matter what, he liked the values of Western civilization.
Okay.
And 2 years of war with Donbass, but then later it became better and better. And I was there because of my school, so I was on the ground. People became happier, and everything was going all right. And then in 2019, a surprise. A lot of oligarchs didn't like Poroshenko because he tried to go after them because of the corruption.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was Kolomoisky, and he had the biggest bank. It's called Privatbank. And he nationalized that bank for the simple reason that that guy was basically taking the money out of people's pockets and for his own things, whatever it was. So, and the anti-corruption committee was established. All of that all institutions that were established in corruption-wise, they were good and bad, because good things that they exist, bad things they didn't have any real power, right? So people were confused, and out of the blue, there's this comedian, Zelensky. He is a very popular comedian. He's like Charlie Chaplin of not just Ukraine, in Russia, everywhere. He produces a lot of movies. His movies are tops all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He has a talk show. He has a theater, and it's sold out everywhere. And he's licensing his movies all over the world, everywhere. So he's very popular.
Right.
Very, very popular. And he gets elected. 73% of people elect him, especially from the east, which is Donbass, Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, all of that stuff. Russian-speaking people.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was seeing this, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this is just a joke. A clown is becoming the president. It's just a joke. What does he know about anything? I'm an entertainer too, right? But I wouldn't be daring to do this,
Head of state.
I would start probably with managing a building and then managing a street or something,
Do you think he was probably just as surprised as everybody else that he actually won?
Everybody was surprised. He was surprised too. He didn't have a team. So he was kind of gathering the team, out of whoever is there.
Mm-hmm.
But people who were around them kind of believed in the new spirit, finally we can do something cool. And the first thing he did is like, let's develop a huge IT sector. And actually everything in Ukraine right now so there's no paper. It's all in your phone.
Right.
Everything's in your phone.
Yeah.
Passport, everything.
Technologically advanced.
Right. Because there's a lot of IT engineers in Ukraine, so he gathered them together and put the idea into their head, and they have a new ministry of basically a department of IT with the government. So that was kind of unique and adventurous and pretty much a good idea, because it kind of loses the idea of bureaucracy and corruption itself, because you can't, it's right there, everything.
Right.
So it's kind of a good idea. But still, me personally, I didn't support him. My wife is Ukrainian citizen. She didn't vote for him. And we kind of, thought it's a joke, didn't like the guy, didn't understand what he was doing. And it's like sort of like 25% of Ukrainians didn't support him, but majority did. So he was a truly elected majority president. No question about it. No question about it. Then all of a sudden, in 2020, when the COVID came, everybody started to criticize him, the ones who voted for him. And I was very surprised.
What was their big beef with him?
There was a lot of media saying, look, he's a Russian-speaking, he doesn't support Russian-speaking people. And he became president of Ukraine, and by constitution, he needs to speak Ukrainian to the microphone. So that's what he did. He couldn't even speak at the beginning, but he's an actor. He learned. Mm-hmm. He's fast. And he started speaking Ukrainian. That was not well received by the East, right? But not just by the East, by media controlled by the oligarchs, controlled by Kremlin. So that was that's where we get him. Because they couldn't. Because we all knew sooner or later Russia has to invade. Everybody Ukrainian knew that. They took Crimea, they took the East. They want to make sure that they take it. We all knew that. So, and what happened is we want to make sure that the president knows how else he can defeat, right? And they were, thankfully to Trump, his cabinet was sending the weapons to Ukraine, because Obama sent blankets, and that guy sent weapons. Not for free, but Ukraine needed weapons, because Ukrainians understood that there is war going on every day in eastern Ukraine. People are getting killed. We want to make sure.
And this was during the Russian buildup of troops, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly in 2020, they started to build up on the south.
Okay.
So they were building for 2 years. Then you remember the Belarusia problem, and that's how Putin got the Belarusia on their side, right? And then the troops were going all the way in order to surround Ukraine.
Right.
So Putin's idea of Ukraine is very simple. His ambition is very banal. He wants to be remembered as Lenin. That's his ambition. That's all it is. But the idea of how he does it, he has ideology, again, as I mentioned, is against the West, right? Now he sees a Jewish guy doing capitalistic ideas in Ukraine. That means weakens Russia, right? And goes against his belief system. First of all, the fascists and the Bolsheviks against Jews, because they're capitalists, just given.
So internally, he sees Ukraine as part of Russia. It's not like he wants it to become part of Russia. He sees it that way already.
He wants Ukraine part of Soviet state. It's not part of Russia. He's very much a Russophile. A Russophile is a word that he uses. Well, that means he is all pro-Russian. That's called Russophile.
Okay.
And he divides people anti-Rus, anti-Russian, and pro-Russian. That's all he sees in the world. And everybody who doesn't like Russia is anti-Russian. Everybody who criticizes Russia is anti-Russian. That's very simple for him, right? He doesn't understand the what you said, the values of democracy and all. He understands the ideology of KGB and Stalin and all that anti-capitalist idea. That's what he is, and that's what he's feeding to people. But they are eating it up because that's how they grew up. They are sons and daughters of Bolsheviks.
Well, speaking of propaganda, like we were before, do you think the average Russian person, I know they agree with what he's doing, but do they really know what's going on over there?
No, they don't. And I know that for sure because my brother lives there. And
we have state-controlled media, but I guess internet's been shut down at this point?
Well, it's not shut down yet. And if it's going to be shut down from the West, China has it. So internet is going to be up. But it's going to be used against the West. And right now they shut down the Facebook and the social sites. I think the Twitter and
Snapchat.
Yeah, they shut down that. But they have their own social sites. And
but they don't get any news from this part of the world.
Zero.
Yeah.
Well, for example, I'm not going to go far away. Let me read the news right now. What's in Russia? And we'll see what's going on.
Sure, it'd be great.
I'll go. Here's my capitalistic iPhone. And I go to a site called RIA. RIA.ru. RIA.ru.
Okay.
That's a very popular Russian news. It's kind of like New York Times.
Okay.
Right.
Kind of like mainstream.
State-controlled, obviously.
Everything state-controlled. You're not allowed to have different opinion.
So there were some, at least what we've heard on the news here, that there were some free media there that all got shut down.
All shut down.
Yeah.
And that's about 2 years ago. Not just now.
Not just now.
No. 2 years ago, got shut down.
Okay.
What are the headlines today in Moscow?
Let me see. Here's download. Bad internet here, guys. RIA Novosti, right? It's downloading. Just read the headlines. There you go. There you go. So the first one, SBU, that's Ukrainian Security Office, right? Kind of like a FBI here, right?
Okay.
It's all about Ukraine, of course, and they started to. So the Ukrainian security started to hunt people who want to immigrate to Russia.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
How helpful.
Of course.
Oh.
Now, Putin told Macron and Scholz, so Macron is the French president and Scholz is German, that the Ukrainian army don't keep the international law.
Right, he's getting into the use of chemical weapons, or at least saying that Ukraine
There is no chemical weapons in Ukraine, but
right.
if he's saying this,
He's
that
going to
means
say they're going to use them, right?
that means
It's
he's
a
planning.
setup, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Russian army have control of Novoandreev and Kirill. I'm not sure what these points are, so I don't know what that is. Serbia applauds Russia, of course. Now, Russia is making sure that people in Berdansk and Melitopol are safe and they're giving humanitarian aid. It's a lie. I just saw today from a friend of mine from Melitopol video how the ballistic missiles going into the 9-floor buildings and destroying everything.
Yeah.
And more than that, I mean, my family's there.
So
And it's all like that. So basically, they take anything from Ukraine and they twist it. And I saw it in Russia.
Sure.
I remember even like during the Donbass time, which I think it was like 2015, I think, they show a field and they show a cannon, and the cannon shoots somewhere into the field. And the narrative says, we see how the Nazi Ukrainians kill the peaceful Russian-speaking people.
Yeah.
So these Nazis want to kill anti-Russians. I mean, they anti-Russians, they want to kill Russians. And that's his rhetoric, and that was 2015, and it's on the news all the time. When you talk to a Russian in Los Angeles, he'll say, yeah, but it's all the West who's there in Ukraine mingling all that stuff. Putin is right. because they live in here, they watching Russian news.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for example, today there was in Berlin, yesterday in Berlin, a Russian community came out with Russian flags and USSR flags, and say we support Putin, West get out of Ukraine. Right, so that's how the fifth column works. I'm not sure if you know the term.
Yeah.
So they put that ideology inside of those countries, which is the enemy for them, and make sure it's split, so there is no support, and that's why the government cannot decide what to do. For example, Macron could have helped Ukraine a long time ago. Germany, of course, could have, because
everybody saw
know.
this latest thing coming. They had a
Of
2-year
course.
build-up.
Of
They weren't
course.
having a barbecue out there.
Of course. Ukraine government wanted to make sure, and by the way, if you notice, Biden was screaming, Russia's going to invade, Russia's going to invade. But that was exactly the KGB propaganda. They are trying to West behave as their main spokesperson. And then Russia denies that. And obviously they lie because they invade.
Yeah.
Right? But these guys will make a panic. Even though the Ukrainians didn't make a panic. They knew it was going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And they were preparing. But if you make a panic, what's going to be good for that?
Yeah.
Right?
As long as it's beneficial for them.
But that's how KGB works. That's how KGB works. And I'm so I'm actually upset more about, not about people. I mean, people either know or they don't. But I'm upset about the leaders, because they are bound by contracts that have no legal anymore power, and they think it's about bureaucracy. They do. They don't understand this is basically civilized world needs to be involved. Otherwise, it's not going to be civilized.
Right.
It's just a very simple thing. If you're civilized, you care about human life. Basically, you care about the values that we in civil world know, right? If you don't, then you're probably not civilized. So, and by the way, Putin said that, because I speak Russian, and I read and I hear what he says. It's not translated here. A lot of that what he said is just unbelievable. Like for example, he said on the 23rd of February.
That's the day before they.
The day before that, he said, "Well, they are self-proclaimed civilization, the West. We don't think so." He said that on the national TV. Not a single newspaper said that here. Right? So it's an evil guy who's stating things directly, not being translated. Now, obviously, this propaganda works for the Russians, and those people who here believe, yeah, he's right, because of the deep state, whatever they want to do, right? But in a sense, it's all about destroying the Western values as they are. NATO, if you think about NATO, well, let's just think logically. What is NATO? It's basically 3 countries, right? It's America, England, and Germany, and France maybe, 4th country. That's it. All other countries are tiny, tiny countries.
Right. Yeah, it's made up of many nations.
What is Belgium? It's nothing. It's just tiny country. What is Netherlands? Tiny country. Norway, 4 million people in the entire Norway. So people don't realize that NATO is actually not that big of a deal. Yeah, it's a bureaucratic state, right? It's a bureaucracy more so than at least like UN in that sense, where Putin realizes very well. And then at the end of the day, each country has to make sure that they defeat themselves. Biden says he asked 12,000 troops into Polish border, right? 12,000 troops. Well, 200,000 Russians came to Ukraine. 200,000. Does he realize who is he talking to? Idiots.
That's the same thing I thought when I heard that he was sending 8,000 here and 10,000 there, and thought, well, what are they doing?
What are they doing?
They need somebody to serve the coffee. What
Exactly.
else the hell are they going to do?
What is going on? So there is no decisive.
Maybe he's overconfident. Just thinks, hey, they got 100,000. We only need 50 guys.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
You don't knock it off, we're going to send another 5,000 over there.
And then the humanitarian crisis. Ukraine right now has 2,500,000 people left Ukraine,
Right.
and it's mostly to Poland.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. So my wife and I set up a fund in helping all those kids and women, because the men stay in Ukraine.
Right. They have to stay and fight.
They stay and fight. So the kids goodbyes, and not sure what's going to happen. And a lot of these women also don't have any means to survive.
Right.
Even if they go to Poland and let's say Poland says, okay, we'll take you as a refugee, well, that means there is a gym at school and they put some mattresses on and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next? You know, it's a very terrible situation. And now imagine you are in cities like Mariupol or Severodonetsk, where my wife is from.
Which is now, I've heard, surrounded.
They all surround it.
Yeah.
They all surround, and it's obvious, but because that's the Crimea, that's what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the map, but it's about a night, about 40 bombs go into one neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
40 bombs a night.
That's just terror, man.
It's just terror. The Russians have like about 2 days ago, they got a command: if they see a civilian, they shoot. Don't care. And you know why? Because the civilians fight.
But Putin has to have a plan. He has to have an end game.
It's a very simple plan.
So
He knows that West is going to be silent. He knows that. If you remember what Biden said in January, right? Oh, if Putin does a minor incursion in Ukraine, that's fine, right? Right.
Yeah, said it out loud in a microphone. If it's a minor thing, you know.
Yeah, it's fine.
He's looking for an excuse not to get involved.
Exactly.
That
So,
shows.
and I understand sort of him. Look, he's a humanitarian. He wants to make sure that Americans are safe, that nothing's going to
Sure,
happen.
yeah.
I kind of understand that, but at the same
do
time,
you think it's that, or do you think it's fear of escalation? Because I think that if we got into a conflict, a direct conflict with Russia,
it's not direct conflict.
That the escalation would.
It's not a direct conflict. The direct conflict, if Biden says, "Oh, let's bomb Russia," that's direct.
Well, a no-fly zone would become direct conflict.
No flight zone can be managed for civilian lives, not for the soldiers. It's a difference in that, and that was also implemented in Iraq and in Syria. It was done, and Trump was he was in power, by the way, when that happened. So it's just a manipulation.
So you don't think Putin would see that as just an act of war? The first time a Russian plane got shot down in a no-fly zone?
He said, if somebody helps Ukraine, we'll say this is an act of war.
Mm-hmm.
But did you see his face? He has Botox everywhere. His wife lives in Switzerland, right? What war? He wants to bomb his wife in Switzerland, so he wants to make sure that he doesn't have a Botox anymore? No, he doesn't. It's all a poker game.
It's a bluff.
Of course. So, but he understands the West, especially the leaders. He understands the bureaucracy wins there. He understands that they are risking their ratings.
Mm-hmm.
He understands that this is not ideology for them. It's about the money value for them, right? He understands that, and that's what I'm trying to say all this time. That it's a different fight. These fight with the printed money, and these fight with rockets and ideology. It's a different game, right? And if you want to fight Putin, and you don't want to make sure that he goes to Lithuania next and maybe Poland next, and I guarantee you, if he goes to Lithuania and Poland, that's a NATO country, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. Everybody's going to be the same afraid because we don't want to make sure everybody's safe here, and he'll get what he wants.
It's 1935 all over again, man.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, look how that ended, though.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
no, it's a bluff. Nobody's going to do the nukes for sure, and Russians know that too. Trust me, nobody wants in Russia any nukes.
right.
So
I mean, why end our way of life? It's pretty good.
And remember that he's not the only one there. There are generals there. The army is a big army.
Well, he's taken how many? Is it 2 nuclear energy sites in Ukraine?
He took Chernobyl, which is near Kyiv, north of Kyiv, but that's kind of a dead factory. Basically, what happened after the disaster there, they put the cement all over,
Right.
so it doesn't do anything. But if a rocket goes into, it's going to be a
He's gonna
disaster.
release it
Spread out
again,
all
yeah.
kind of
Right
stuff.
now, he went to Zaporizhia, and Zaporizhia, that's biggest power station in Europe.
Yeah, 70% of the power for Ukraine.
Right.
I
at
don't
least,
think he
right?
wants to blow that up. And
What they've done, they put Chechens there, and they fought people because they know the Ukrainians will not be shooting at the power station.
Mm-hmm.
So they went there, and they trying to make, as we speak, a military center because they know and nobody's going to shoot there, but they'll put their rockets there and the whole thing.
Sure, yeah.
That's what they do. That's their tactics. So they basically take the most significant and very vulnerable places and put their own rockets, whatever it is there, that nobody will shoot them there. That's their tactics. That's what they do. That's why they want big cities, because that's where the civilians live.
Mm-hmm.
Ukrainians will not shoot at civilians.
Human shield.
Right. So that's what they do. That's why they destroy the cities. They don't go into the field to fight. They go to cities.
But I thought socially the Russians and Ukrainians were so intertwined. I mean, from what
There's
I've
a lot
heard,
of families.
Yeah,
yes.
a lot of families
Yeah,
are half Russian, half Ukrainian.
Of course, yeah.
How's I mean, that's
Well, people are people, right? So people have families, they have friends, brothers, sisters, and all that, and they go to live in those countries where there's opportunity, right? Basically for economics. So a lot of, for example, even in my family, Ukraine had the best institute for oil and gas, right? So they got educated there, but the oil and gas is in Russia, so they got the jobs in Russia.
okay.
Right, even the Halliburton is there and all that stuff, right, in Russia. So, and all these educated people go there, even though they are from Ukraine. So a lot of that happens, right? So then now, I mean, again, and I will not stress enough how important the ideology is. That's exactly what ideology of Lenin was, to make sure there is no national identity. So if there is no national identity, then there will not be independence for that nation, right? And that was Stalin who was doing. He was putting people from Ural Mountains to Ukraine, from Ukraine to Azerbaijan, and so on and so forth, right? To make sure they all intermingled,
Okay.
right? And that's how Soviet Union basically, I think, because of that, kind of stayed together. Because they forced them to do Soviet Union, right? That's how they stayed together, because nobody could organize, in a sense, in the national identity. And that's the biggest threat to Putin, right? So he doesn't want to do this. He has one idea, that everything has to do about his ideology. Now, the same thing was gonna happen to Lithuania, I guarantee you. I almost guarantee, because Belarus is there. And Kaliningrad in Russia is in Baltic Sea. And in order to get from Russia to Kaliningrad, you can't go now because of sanctions. So you have to go through Lithuania. So it's just on the way.
Yeah, he needs a land bridge.
Right, it's on the way. And I'm sure they know about it. I'm sure there is also already probably some military that gathering around that border.
But from what we've been told here, and at least the general consensus is that, the Russians can take Ukraine, but they can't hold it.
Well, they can destroy the cities. You're right.
Yeah, they can destroy it, and they're working on that.
Yeah, because they have rockets.
Right.
That's what they have. They have rockets, and they can destroy. There's more rockets in Ukraine than the entire World War II.
So damage the infrastructure, make it unlivable, and
Correct.
Mission accomplished.
That's why there's a lot of refugees. But that doesn't mean, who's going to live there?
Right.
So if his end game is kind of, baffles me a little bit, because, all right, you're going to destroy the cities. All right, you put your mayor there, and then what? Who's going to pay your tax? Who's going to live there? Ukrainians are all united now. It doesn't mean Russian-speaking Ukrainians. It's all united, and they want to kill Russian.
Oh, yeah.
So it's going to be for hundreds of generations now. There's no other way. And Ukrainians are not, they're not also economically bound. They're bound by blood, by culture, by history.
So perpetual insurgency.
Yeah.
It's already happening.
Right.
The Molotov cocktails is like everybody has it.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty good videos with Molotov cocktails.
Everybody who wants to. So there's a law that Zelensky said that if you want to shoot a Russian, no problem. They have a law now. Parliament adopted it. So if you say, yeah, I'm going to shoot them, well, here's a Kalashnikov for you. That's why they're shooting every civilian. Children, it's a command for them. Children, anybody, women, they shoot.
I've seen
dead.
some horrific stuff, and I'm sure it's just the tip of the iceberg with the mass graves. The morgues are full. They're just pushing them in a ditch and covering them up, man.
Well, what happened so far is that the insurgency is so big that they didn't expect that. And a lot of Russian army came thinking it's going to be easy.
Right.
And they didn't expect that resistance.
I could tell they took them lightly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the KGB didn't do the due diligence to Putin. They didn't understand how united Ukrainians are. And a lot of dead bodies, what you see, is the soldiers, the Russian soldiers. More than that, because of the internet, Ukrainians are eager to show what they do to the Russians.
Right.
They're not holding back. It's the first time in my life that I would think that Ukrainians would do this. That's the animosity right now of Ukrainians, every Ukrainian in the world. And you will not stop that. You will not stop that. So even though if Russia, let's say hypothetically, Russia takes Lviv, Kyiv, and everything else, it's going to be a cancer for them forever.
Right.
It's not going to.
So that was a miscalculation
Yeah.
on Putin's behalf.
Yes, I think
So how does he come out of this then? I mean, because he's got to get away from it somehow and save face. How's he going to do that?
in my opinion, Ukraine right now has the spear, right, and the shield at the same time, and I think that Putin will make an agreement. Because,
Really?
yeah, because he miscalculated, as you said it, the Ukrainian resistance. He miscalculated the Ukrainian army. He miscalculated the Ukrainian, how should I put it?
Even geography, because they didn't have a good lay of the land. They were following road maps and signs that had been redirected them.
There was one ballistic missile went to Yugoslavia because it was the same name on the map, so the Russians put it. So yeah,
That's a bad accident right there.
That's not good, but thankfully it's Yugoslavia for them, right? So, and you're absolutely right. So they can't navigate. They're stuck in mud. They don't know what to do in this forest and that forest. They don't know where the insurgents are.
Yeah, they're not used to resistance.
They have no idea. That's why they're asking ISIS now, because ISIS know how to do the street fights, right? And Putin and ISIS, I mean, it should be a secret now. The Palestinians, the ISIS, it's all Putin, right? It's all the Kalashnikovs. It's all against the West. So the West has to wake up a little bit, and then so they want to make sure that these ISIS come. But he put the Kadyrov Chechen fighters. So there's a battalion completely destroyed. So Ukrainians are not holding back. I think
Ukrainians are tough, impressive. I mean, I've seen
yeah.
some stuff. I was like, wow.
Yeah, so what do you think of the president of Ukraine now?
Well, I thought he was a clown. Now I think he's a hero. It's that's how people, I guess, change in a very unique environment. I think he's a true hero. He's super tough.
I tell you what, anybody else head of state with all that going on would have been on the next plane with all the cash they could carry, man.
I'm sure it would be in bunker, given away.
Yeah.
I don't want to say names, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, he's a badass for sure.
Yeah, he's a true patriot. He's like, there's my children here. His wife and children are there. They're not overseas anywhere. So, and they standing strong because they're sure they're on the right side. That's it. And every Ukrainian is like that too. I know my friends, musicians, famous musicians. They took the guns and go fight in the real army, in the real fight. I would do it too. If I didn't have a boy, I would do it too. Well, even though I'm American, but I grew up there. I feel very strongly that it's not fair. And for me, the history of Russian, it's a very, when I was a boy, I was 7 years old, and my mom and I, we were going to Siberia, and we were flying through Moscow, and I'll never forget this. We were flying through Moscow, and the first time I see in my life Fanta, Moscow had this
Oh, yeah.
Fanta and Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh my God, Fanta, Mom, can I have Fanta? and I
Good
said,
stuff. Strawberry, yeah.
and I asked her in Ukrainian, and she said to me, "Shh, don't speak Ukrainian because they'll put us in Gulag." That's 1979.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because she remembered from her dad, right? So that's how strong it is in Ukrainian heritage, right? It's in our gene pool, if you will. And now there is gloves off. Putin says, hey, you know what? Ukrainian nation should not exist. Ukrainian state should not exist. He just said it blankly like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how is it possible that anybody in the 21st century would say that? So basically he's saying, well, it's a genocide and I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and then Ukrainians, what, are going to sit? No. Going to fight. So,
And so everything he's telling the West is bullshit then. So,
Yeah.
because his main complaint is he didn't want Ukraine to join NATO. You know,
that's
that's what we hear here.
That's for Americans to hear, because Americans
Yeah.
think that the NATO is a bad guy.
I hear the same thing. I
Right.
see
Yeah.
the same thing on social media.
No,
Well,
it's
you
not.
wouldn't like it either if you had a country right next to you with all the missiles, and they
Well,
refer
guess,
back to the Cuban
guess
Missile
what he's
Crisis.
trying to do to put missiles onto NATO.
Yeah,
That's his goal.
That's
That's how
always-
trickster it
it's
is.
always been like
It's a
that.
cynical idea, and basically he's doing this on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the confusion in propaganda is, and that's how he wins on the West, through propaganda, because propaganda gives the idea of permission to kill certain nation.
It excuses, justifies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know
So-
what I'm seeing a lot on the news is that there's a lot of protests going on in Russia, and it gives me the
Yeah.
idea that the Russian people are against this war and they don't believe anything that's going on.
First of all, they don't
You know.
know there is a war. 95% of Russians support Putin right now. And it's no joke. Not because they think he's killing Ukrainians. No. Because they think he's defending Russia from the evil West.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Right.
all. Again, it's the same line over and over. And they
So-
believe that.
You think there's any truth to the fact that at the beginning of this, a week or so ago, there was protests that sprung up, and I heard that they created a new law, which I don't know whether they did a new law because they've been repressive all this time. They get 15 years for even admitting that there's a
that
war.
there's a war. Yeah.
If you say it publicly that there is a war, that Russia invaded Ukraine, these kind of words, but these words. If you say that Russia is doing the military operation in Ukraine, there is no jail. If you say that Russia created a war against Ukrainians, jail. It's 15 years in prison camp, hard labor. So that's their law. Now, even more so, let's say if you sing a song that there is no war, let's say, it's the same law. So anything publicly. And it's a huge repression. It's the same as Stalin did, identical book, KGB book.
Mhm.
And then the gulags are there. Russia is big in gulags. There's no doubt about that. Right? And the majority of people who go into the army right now, into Russian army, are the 18-year-olds. So they can't fight.
Right.
It's basically they're going to die because Ukraine's going to kill. Right? So just news today that the Navy SEALs of Russia, basically the Navy SEALs,
Mm-hmm.
from Crimea, 70 of them, the commander put them into Odessa. So we go to Odessa, so they refused because they're afraid. It's like, look, we don't want to go because we're going to be killed.
Mm-hmm.
They went back to Crimea. So a lot of that happened. So what I'm saying is that Ukrainians are creating this idea that don't fight with us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good motion.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way that European Union will be alive. I'll guarantee you that. Because next is going to be Lithuania, then Poland, and maybe Czech Republic. And then maybe Finland, because they want Finland. And Sweden is their enemy forever. And they're not in NATO.
So it's all about expansionism.
Because Bolsheviks, it's about the world revolution. Remember that, Marx.
Mhm.
Right? Against the capitalism. Venezuela oil. Biden says that, hey, we want to make sure that Venezuela oil is producing. Well, who has Venezuela oil? Russian state. It was Rosneft who licensed the oil from Venezuela, right? And they gave it away, all the action, to the Russian state. So if Venezuela is producing oil, who's getting rich? Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So all that cynicism, what I see, and and I have a lot of friends in
complicated
in Rosneft, and I know the situation, and it's terrible what's going on because of indecisiveness. Again, how serious it is. It's not about the paperwork. It's not about the bureaucracy. It's about the values. It's either civilized world or uncivilized.
Mm-hmm.
And Putin tear any contract away. Right? He did it. So the gloves are off. It's civilized world now, like Ukrainians do. Gloves are off too, but we're civilized.
Mm-hmm.
Right? To make sure that they know and they punish those enemies the right way. So nobody should be afraid of that. Imagine this. You're in the house now and somebody comes and is like, get out. You're going to fight. Or you're going to say, no, hang on, I have a lease. Hang on a second. I have a title here. Hang on a second. You don't have the right. He doesn't care.
Right.
You're going to fight. That's the proper response. And it's not about nuclear weapons, because that's exactly what propaganda tells you. Again, all his family in Western Europe. He's constantly on Botox.
Mm-hmm.
What nukes? He loves himself too much. And not just him, but generals. All their money were in Caribbean. These sanctions don't do anything. They only empower the ideology to Russian people that he's doing the right thing.
Yeah, they just see the pain.
Yeah.
And he blames the West, and
Yeah, it's easy. Yeah, and the West is supporting the Nazis, and all of that stuff. So that's what he does. And I think the end for this again is going to be, thankfully, because Ukrainians are not going to give up, and he will realize he was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, European Union will understand how important it is to help Ukrainians more and more, military-wise. And he will be pressured, not by American government, I doubt that, but by European Union. And that's the only way he can be stopped. And maybe the generals in Russia, as they do it all the time, they'll probably change the political leader there.
And he's got to be stopped.
Yeah.
Because we have a disaster going on right now. Hour by hour, more innocent people are paying the price for all this.
Absolutely.
And I know you've got a GoFundMe up.
Yep.
You want to give those details here?
Yeah, we did a Gofundme.com, and it's called Help Refugees from Ukraine, and it's from Vlad and Elena DeBriansky. And we helped already 30 women.
Okay.
And they are in different situations. It's one-by-one case, and I'm constantly on the email, and my wife too. We have about maybe 150 in the queue. We didn't go through them yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I know you've got some houses in France that are...
a lot of different things. For example, the majority are women who stuck in Ukraine under shelling. They sit in the basement, but they have the telephone.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully to Elon Musk, so there's a Starlink through the internet. They can't get out. The only way they can get out is 2 hours a day. They can go to a pharmacy that's open maybe, and maybe some store that's open. That's it. Now, the diapers, for example, problem. Right, the medicine is a problem. For example, some women are used to certain medicine, but they go to different locations, so there's no that.
Yeah, I'm sure
anymore.
food is going to be a problem very soon.
Food is probably going to be a problem, but so far food was not a problem. Food is there, and I checked with my friends. Everything's open in a sense, and a lot of volunteers deliver food.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Yeah, so the majority are these women who are stuck without husbands. They are under the shelling, and they can't work. Obviously, and they can't get the money, right? And they have the babies. So, like for example, like today, we just spoke to one woman. She is in Kherson. Kherson is like near Crimea. She has 4 babies, 2, 3, 5, and 7.
Oh my God.
She's in basement for a week and a half already. She has a bank card. And she says, "Can you send me to a card?" I said, "I can't. We can't do this because in Ukraine, so there's a system kind of like PayPal. You can send from a card to card." I said, "We need your passport and we'll send it through Western Union or MoneyGram, and we'll do that way. And basically, what we figured out, we found her relatives in Ternopil, and we send it to them, and they will get the money, and through the card, we'll send it to their card, and she can get out during the day, get the food and diapers. Right, that's the only way we can help. And she's begging me, it's like, well, can you get me out of the basement? Oh, what can I do?
From here, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the monetary wise, we can help.
Right.
Right, especially for the kids, sure. So that's what we do. Then also the refugees who are already in Poland, Romania, there's a lot of refugees. Just a lot.
1.5 million.
More.
2.5.
2.5.
2.5. Is that
And
what
it's
it is
growing.
now?
It's growing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, Poland welcomed everybody, but I mean, what can they do? Where can they place them? Right. So they
Yeah,
created
that's a lot of stress on one area.
one
you know?
one nation.
Yeah.
Switzerland said that 2,500 people are accepting now, and France is accepting now, and UK is thinking now too.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. And so, what we're doing, we are creating a link between the people who can host and who is seeking a place to be somewhere to live, and a lot of these people kind of contact us here and there, and then we pay for their ticket. Let's say because inside of European Union, so there's a law if you're an immigrant from Ukraine, it's free.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, going from Poland to Ireland, it's 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So how are they going to survive? Right. So we give them money for that. Right. And then a lot of these people don't speak other languages than Ukrainian, and it's in Polish and then France and then whatever. So who's going to be the guide?
Very complicated.
Right. So we're kind of trying to find a guide who'll get them through. It's usually a Polish guy, maybe somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and but they need support too, and so a lot of these kind of things that NGO will not find, because NGO is a place like a Red Cross, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
They have a truck, a certain place, will go get there. Well, I mean, how you can get there?
Right.
If you're somewhere in the village somewhere, well, it's impossible. Right. So a lot of these situations that we're targeting, and we get emails from much more people, but we're targeting these kind of situations. So basically, if it's a woman with toddlers, there's nowhere to go and no help. So we do that right away. And we're raising this money through Gofundme. Then I got approached by this German woman who offered me help in Bitcoins. I never done this in my life. I don't know what that is. She explained it to me. And then she explained it's easier to transfer and exchange for money. So
Right.
we set it up through her, and she's doing that as well. So I don't know honestly how it works, but we're doing that as well. But our main goal is this fund right now. My music is on hold
Sure.
indefinitely for now, and my school is on hold, and it got bombed, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of that. My beautiful Fender guitars are bombed.
Yeah.
So
And you still have family in Ukraine, correct?
no.
No.
My parents are already dead.
Okay.
My brother left Ukraine 10 years ago. I left Ukraine 30 years ago. But my wife does.
Okay.
My wife has a grandmother and a mom, and they are in Severodonetsk. Severodonetsk, that's where huge shelling right now is.
Mm-hmm.
And they already lost their apartments, lived in apartment buildings. The rocket
Right.
shot there, so they safe, but they in basement, and there is no help there because the Russians don't allow the humanitarian aid to come in. They shoot everybody.
Right.
They basically holding the civilians as
Hostage.
hostage, yes,
Right.
because they know
Right.
that's the safest way for them, and otherwise would be bombed, right?
So what do you think the United States can do to expedite an end to this situation?
Send rockets, send military aid,
Just
send
military hardware, or you
Absolutely.
think we need troops as well?
if somebody wants from the troops, yes, absolutely. I mean, again, it's not aggression against Russia. It's helping Ukraine.
Right.
And that's what Biden administration has to put together a thought around it. That's correct way to do this. It's not about, hey, we're going to bomb Russia. No, we're helping Ukraine to survive. We're helping civilization to survive. We're helping people not to die. It's very simple.
Because if we don't do something, it sounds like this is just going to continue.
If we don't do this, then we'll just feeding the aggressor more and more and more. He sees the weakness, his appetite grows. It's just simple, and he knows that.
And I think that a big consensus with just regular Americans is that Russia will get tired of the sanctions, and somebody in Russia will take him out. It'll be done.
False. First of all, let me remind you of Soviet Union. Soviet Union was under sanctions 70 years, 75. And what? They developed nuclear weapons. They developed a strong army, science, everything worked. Everything worked. Education worked. Everything worked. Again, sanctions work economically.
Mm-hmm.
But economically on the world market, first of all. Second of all, sanctions that are imposed right now are laughable.
Mm-hmm.
It's against individuals, not
Right.
against the country. Those individuals, they have money in Caribbean Sea.
Right. Yeah. You can't hunt down all the oligarchs'
Yeah,
money
it's
'cause
just
everywhere.
laughable. It's laughable. It only fuels to rhetoric of Putin. The West is bad and tells people, look, your stores are closed because the West wants you to not have it, right? So it just fuels it. It's just bad. It's just basically bad decision. It's bad governing. It's a bad idea of foreign policy. It's just all bad. It's just simply bad. However, if they didn't do sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine, the same stores Mercedes is selling there, but Biden is giving the military aid, serious military aid,
Mm-hmm.
Then it sure is a signal to Putin, look, don't come here.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's simple as that.
Right.
It's very simple, and that's the only way to do this. Because sanctions is just only works a plus to Putin ideology, because ideology is the same. Look, they want us to die. They want us not to have clothes and food and things like that.
Right.
Right? So therefore, we'll go further. And today, actually, I watched the Russian propaganda on Channel 1. There's a guy called Solovyov, and he already announcing that.
Mm-hmm.
He's their main kind of propaganda guy. And he already saying, look, we shouldn't stop at Ukraine. They're already preparing that public. We shouldn't stop at Ukraine, yeah, because they are against us, and Russians will fight the evil. And everybody's, yeah, absolutely. So I think it's just a wrong. I think foreign policy is a terrible from Obama and Biden. As far as Trump, foreign policy was much quicker, responsive, and at least he was the guy who kind of believed that the World War III is a bad idea, and he prevented it. He said it publicly, but he prevented it. And, if you want peace, prepare for war. That's basically the idea. And nothing changed after that rhetoric, Pythagoras was saying this, So it's a long time ago that we live by this idea. And if you want civilization to survive, and we don't want to speak Russian here, eventually, then we have to do something. Because if you don't do anything, well, it's going to be destroyed.
Right.
First within the country, then outside the country. And it's already working this way. I understand that it's hard to comprehend when you go outside the Starbucks and you have a coffee. It's like, yeah, it's somewhere outside. I don't know. It's like wars after war, but we have bills to pay and things like that. I understand that. I was also the same in Ukraine. Oh, whatever. Right? So until the rocket hits that cafe where you're sitting, then you start to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's how we have to be very pragmatic and realize that Russians think the main enemy for them is the USA.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody here has to realize that, including the fifth column who lives here. They have to realize that. There is no illusion about it. Not for Russians and not for Americans. It always was this way after the World War II. That's how the world was divided. So I think the best solution right now is support Ukrainians, the fierce fighting, and
Mm-hmm.
you cannot kill idea of being Ukrainian. You just can't.
Right.
It's just, I'm not. That's why I'm baffled by Putin's idea, right? So, but you have to empower them
Mm-hmm.
to defeat the civilians, to make sure that there's no this crisis, because the more civilians are dying, the more Ukrainians are going to kill Russians. I guarantee you that. And Russians are going to be in shock when soon they will find out there's so many Russian soldiers are dead, because they don't know yet. So far 12,000 military soldiers are dead, according to Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
and 1,200 Ukrainian soldiers are dead, and about 2,000 civilians in Ukraine are dead. That's so far, but obviously it's it's a war, so it's hard to
Right.
say. Comparing to this to, let's say, the World War II. In World War II, 11 million civilians were refugees.
Mm-hmm.
That's for 6 years. 11 million for 6 years, displaced people. This is 2.5 million for 2 weeks. Just imagine.
That's crazy.
Imagine the crisis that we're going through,
Mm-hmm.
and how fast it's going.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the World War II, slowly by slowly. It's fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it can go spread faster than we think. That's why I think it's important to act now, being decisive. I'm surprised that the senators I'm reading, the senators have to tell Biden what to do. It's strange to me.
I'm not surprised.
Well, you're not surprised. I'm surprised because I became a U.S. citizen for the sake of being part of that Western civilized world.
Right.
I'm contributing to this, and I want to be part of it, and very proud of it. And if I feel that somebody is a bully or somebody is just trying to destroy me, I'll stand strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm surprised that Biden speaks a lot, but it's just lip service, basically. So you have to do something. You have to do something. They sit and, doing whatever they do. So the decision has to be made quicker, faster than they would think even, and not afraid. Because, first of all, you shouldn't be afraid of Putin. He's a weak guy.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, he's bluffing all the time. The only guys who are not bluffing are Ukrainians. That's why he's afraid. Right now, he's the only guy who's afraid of Ukrainians in the world.
Mm-hmm. And
Because
he's just recently learned that lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's afraid of Ukrainians. And that's why he gave the command to kill every Ukrainian. That's what it is. Because he's afraid of them. He's truly afraid of them. He's not afraid of Biden. He's not afraid of Macron. He's not afraid of anybody, because he understands they're bound by the civilized bureaucracy.
A whole different set of rules. Yeah.
Exactly right. So, and how do you do? As I said, if somebody comes to you here, you're not showing your paperwork that you live here. You're going to be fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's exactly the story,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, if you ask me what I would do, again, if my boy was not with me here, I would probably go back and fight, and be happy about it.
Right.
So there is no fear. My wife, who's 30 years old, a beautiful woman, she's like, I'm going to fight. And every woman is like that in Ukraine too.
Right.
Nobody's afraid. Nobody's afraid. So I'm surprised that all these leaders are afraid. I see a lot of Europeans come and help Ukraine. They're not afraid. So people are not afraid.
Mm-hmm.
They are not afraid.
Yeah, I think everybody's they get wound up really quick over nuclear weapons, And that was the one thing that Putin did do. He put his nuclear arsenal on high alert, and it scared the shit out of everybody,
So what?
Well, speaking of nuclear, wasn't it 1994 that Russia, Ukraine, and I guess the United States, I don't know the name of it.
England.
England.
UK.
Yeah, okay. They all had an agreement.
Yes.
No more nukes in Ukraine, and everything was going to be okay, and we'll all be friends.
What happened is...
But there's still nuclear weapons in Ukraine.
No.
No?
No. What happened is this, when Bush Sr. was the president, he pressed Ukraine to give up the nuclear arsenal. Ukraine at that time was the third largest nuclear power in the world.
Yeah, I knew at one time. Yeah, that's what it was. Okay.
The third largest. America was first, Russia second, Ukraine is the third. So it's pretty big. The idea of that time was to make sure that there's no threat of nuclear war, and therefore let's talk to these countries
Yeah.
to reduce it. And that's correct.
Non-proliferation.
Not proliferation. So, and that was a good move, per se. Let's just reduce our power. It's going to be easier for everyone. It's okay. And what happened in Budapest in 1994 in Hungary, America, UK, Russia, and Ukraine signed a deal that Ukraine is giving up all its arsenal, destroying it, right, in exchange for its security. The security is guaranteed by United States, UK, and Russia. Obviously, Russia doesn't keep its promises, as we know.
Right.
But UK and the States doesn't support security either. So that's how Ukrainians feel now. And the last speech of Zelensky, that's how Putin said, okay, we're going to war. It was 2 days after Zelensky said that this is going to be the fourth last time you're going to ask the signees of memorandum to get together and get our security back. If that doesn't work, we're going back to being a nuclear country. Because otherwise, how Ukraine gets that security?
This piece of paper didn't do us any good.
Right. And Ukraine has all abilities to do this. In fact, I'm a nuclear engineer. I can do it. And there's plenty of engineers like that. So, and that's what he said. That was on the 22nd of February. He said that. And his speech, Putin said, "Oh, well, we don't allow that to happen." Right. So it has nothing to do with NATO again, as everybody's thinking here in the States.
Right.
Nothing has to do with NATO. It has to do with the idea that Putin wants to make sure he is the leader of the new world. Basically, against the Western values. The values are pro-Russian. If you are against Russian, you're anti-Russian. That's all it is. Ukraine cannot be independent for simply reason because he wants to make sure there is no other country who says, I'm going to have nuclear weapons. It has nothing to do with NATO.
Well, my fear is Putin's how old now?
70, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
He's 70?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, he sees his end of life, on the horizon.
Yes.
And he wants to leave a legacy.
Yeah. I think that's exactly, you nailed it. That's his idea. He understands he's not going to be forever. And he wants to make sure he's going to be, as Lenin proclaimed in Mausoleum or something like that he created this new era of the world, the new world power, and it's all pro-Russian, right? And he defeated the West finally.
Yeah, and he sees weakness in the world right now, and now's his big chance.
Exactly right. So if you look at this, his supporters are also all the Syrian government, right? All that stuff. So basically, ISIS. It's a war against the West, and he's the leader of that. And he's the leader. He's going to show it to people he established and makes very proud point in his life.
If I pull some strings and set up a meeting, can you explain that to our administration? What's really going on?
I'm sure they do, but it's too much politics involved.
There's too much money involved too. I think there's too many deals all around the world, and too many people related to each other.
Well, as I mentioned about
multifaceted,
about the Venezuela, for example, right? Biden says, "Oh, I'm going to talk to Venezuela." It's just giving money to Putin. America is important Russian oil, right? Oil products, I should say, not oil. Oil products, and it's from 1% to 10 depends on the year, right? And it's not much, right? And
it's millions every day, though.
Yeah, but it's not much, right? For Russians, it's not much, but for Russians, it means dollars, and that's important, right? Because if they export that oil to China, it's 10 times less money, right? The same with gas, right? So they know what's going on there. And by the way, Rosneft and Gazprom, which is gas and natural gas and oil, it's all property basically of Putin and KGB, right? So obviously, if you do these kind of things, oh, we're not going to export oil and all that stuff. Well, there's oil in Venezuela, there's oil in Africa, in Namibia, and it's all Russian hands there, Chinese and Russian hands, right? So to say to the public in America, it's like, hey, we are going to do this, is basically misleading people, because thinking that Americans are stupid is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And
People are seeing that, though.
Exactly. So you can't do this. You have to be honest. You have to understand that people are smarter than you are. I have my own company. I hire people who are smarter than me. I have an idea, a vision, but they has to be smarter because they are doing the hard work and innovation, right? It's the same thing with Americans. And look, who's helping the most in humanitarian crisis for America and Ukraine? Elon Musk. He's giving the Starlink free of charge, right, to make sure that people have money that I'm sending, right? So one American does it because he's smarter, more innovative, right? And imagine giving this to people and being a leader of smart people. That's the idea of America to me. So if you do this, then innovation goes. The people have the potential coming out. They can achieve their highest success and highest goals in life. And that's also to benefit to society. That's a very simple idea. But instead, the government is trying to say, well, we know better. We government and you stupid. That's how they do it.
And they've never run a business in their life. It's a bunch of bureaucrats.
Of course
They've never met a payroll or anything.
Of course. That's why their response to Ukrainian crisis is bureaucratic.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with human values. Like, for example, I would ask Mr. Biden right now, what if somebody put a rocket right now into your town or where you sit or to your son and your son would be dead? What he would do? He would say, oh, hang on a second, it's bureaucracy, hang on a second. He would say that? No, he would fight.
Right.
That's the idea. So, and if you see your comrade, your buddy that you're supporting is having that, what do? You're going to help. It's just simple human value, especially for the values that you share. And that becomes also an ideology, which I think a lot of people even think of that name here, but Russians do all the time. That's why they have, they never think, oh, look, it's fine. We don't need McDonald's. We can do something else. It's fine, but the West is the bad one, because it kind of fuels the idea back to them. Now, to Americans, the value of America is exactly the freedom, exactly the chance. It's quite the opposite. So if Biden says, what should we do? Ask the public if you don't know. It's a very simple democratic idea. And public will tell you.
Yeah.
So, and it's quite opposite. It kind of reminds me of this kind of, of Soviet Union that I grew up. It's like, I'm the government, you know, buddy. That kind of relationship, and it's not going to be a cohesive relationship. It's not going to go and bloom at one point. Opposite, and because again, people invent stuff, not bureaucrats.
Right. They throw money at things.
Yeah.
And they'll take it away from you and give it to them.
Well, because they think it's it's like one of the reasons why I moved to Texas from California, because of that rhetoric that I've seen in California, and it's a dangerous rhetoric, because when you say the government knows better what to do with your money, that's exactly the end of the innovation.
Right.
Right. So it's not about the taxes amount per se, even though it does important, right? But that rhetoric, that who's in charge of your money in your pocket, and how do you deal with this, and how do you, a human being, I have a son, he's a human being, I just make sure that I support him, but he has already his idea what he does. I'm sure everybody who has kids know this. So, and all I can do is just make sure that he knows here and there, and my job is to make sure this is black and this is white. That's all it is, right? But his innovation, it's his innovation. Imagine if I'm a government, it's like, no. I'm not giving you this money for innovation. I know what you should do. That's it. His potential as a human being is destroyed. His potential that's given by God, per se, is destroyed.
That's what it says in our Constitution.
Yeah. The pursuit of happiness is the right, and it's not just
A God-given right.
a
Not
God-given right.
from the government
Of course not.
to take it away when they
Of
want
course
to.
not. So we are free people by default.
Right.
Right.
So that's it. That's the starting point. And then you go and make the society. That's the idea. And I'm a true believer in that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be going from Soviet Union to America. So I became a blues guitarist and jazz guitarist because I have an individual ideas. I only have these fingerprints. Nobody else has this fingerprint, right? So I'm unique in that sense, and therefore I'm happy, right? And it's like a salad. If you have a salad just from tomatoes, it's just tomatoes, and that's it. But if you put some color into that salad, well, that's much better. That's the idea of innovation, And not everybody has to live by one level of life, It's just unfair. Even though they will say that we are unfair, right? So that's how the situation is, and obviously it falls into the propaganda of Bolsheviks, because that's exactly what they will tell you. Oh, capitalism doesn't work. That's their rhetoric. Any of that confusion is going to be just fueling to them. That's how dangerous it is. It's like basically like evil spirit, if you will, right? It feeds off the negative. It feeds off.
Plant a little seed of doubt and work on that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Like we started this conversation today. I'm confused. What's right, what's wrong, right? That's exactly the state of mind that Putin tried to achieve for years and years and years. If you ask a Russian if he's confused, 0.
Right.
If you ask an American, oh, I'm confused. Maybe Ukrainians are bad. I don't know. I don't NATO, and so on and so forth. And that's it.
I'm on the fence about this, but I heard that.
Yeah. And that's it. Then, first of all, you allow that evil to grow. Number 2, your potential as being sure who you are is basically nothing, right? Innovation in the country goes nowhere.
Right.
And then the power of the country goes nowhere. So it's just a step after step. It's a chain reaction, a domino effect. And if Americans don't see it, that's a big problem. That's why, for example, I was hesitating to speak anything about the war, because I'm a musician, I have a career.
Well, you've got a lot at stake because you're really big in Europe, isn't that right?
I was number 1 in Russia in charts, in blues charts. I'm number 1, number 2 Rolling Stones, then Eric Clapton, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's a lot of stake. I mean, I'll lose the entire audience in Russia, right? And that means money for my child.
Right.
Right? I was number 4 in America in jazz charts. Right? So I have audience too. I have audience in Canada, in Europe, in France, and Oslo, and so on and so forth. In Japan, I was number 1 in Japan. Right? So, as my friends, I have a lot of friends celebrities. And they say, oh, it's, that's politicians would do. I don't do this. And I understand why. Because music is ever-reaching, right?
Right.
And
universal language.
It's universal language, and it goes to different groups of people. And if you say something as a person, not as a musician, as a person,
there will be someone that disagrees with that.
Of course. And they will say, hey, okay.
In America?
Everywhere, really.
Right. So, and you risk.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You risk
anytime you speak out, you're sticking
and I
your
knew
neck
it.
out.
I knew it. I'm gonna risk it. And I spoke to my wife, and she said, "Well, maybe I should do it." She told me I shouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I remember my father, and he told me. My father never said a lie. He was this tough guy, a World War II boy, and all that stuff. He was going with Nazis. He told me stories how they killed when he was little people and all that stuff. How he had a piece of bread for a week. He just make sure that he has enough. He was an older brother. There was a younger brother and his mom, because the father died. So, and he at 13 years old was going to the factory to making sure he has some food and such, and he was actually joined the Communist Party in the 60s, And he was one of the guys who basically, I should say, in upper echelons of that party.
Mm-hmm.
But he never lied. He couldn't. He read a lot. His favorite was Balzac, and he loved Ukrainian culture. And then I remember this in 1988, when Gorbachev was in power. And this perestroika, that was the time, all that glasnost basically means, for our audience, like democratic ideas
Right.
kind of poured into Soviet Union at that time. And he started reading about Stalin. And then he asked my mom, because she never told him anything. My mom, she was a dentist, and at the graduation in the 50s, when she was a dentist, her mom and dad came to the graduation, and they were priests. They came, and there was a guy came to her and said, "Oh, if I knew that you from a priest family, you would never graduate from the school." Right, because she remembers that, but she never told my father about that. Right, all these stories, and even though my father knew she was from a religious family, but they never talked about it. So when he started doing this, when he started talking, then he put two and two together. He was one of the first guys in Soviet Union who ripped off the Communist Party membership. And I remember that moment. We gathered in the living room. My mom says, my dad, my brother, and they're saying, well, probably tomorrow they'll take us to Siberia, because I publicly don't believe this bullshit anymore. And Mama is telling me what to do. You have to make sure they have to have food, these things, because they'll take everything away from us. Make sure that you take this, this, and that. And I was prepared for that. Fully prepared. My point is, he wasn't afraid. He would damage himself, his boy, right? But he couldn't stay in denial.
Right.
He had to say the truth. That's it. It's the same for me, So that's why I said it, and I was attacked by a lot of, like even today, a lot of Russians attacking me. Why are you doing this? Do music. Why are you speaking up? We're your friends. All that stuff, They could be KGB agents, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what's happening a lot. I got bombarded because one of my videos got like 7 million views or something, and they bombarded me. Like, Facebook shut me down because they thought it was some disaster or whatever. And, I got attacked by, how do you call these guys who steal your social security number and all that stuff? Hackers.
Mm-hmm.
I got attacked by hackers, my bank account, all that stuff right away.
Right.
So, but you have to take a stand,
You got to stand for something.
Yeah.
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 And that's a problem in this country. I think that the average American has kind of lost that understanding that you get to a point to where you do have to take a stand, and it doesn't matter anymore, what it hurts and whether
Right.
you lose, because you're going to win in the end.
Yep.
So
You're going to lose everything at the end. The thing is, if you want to win bread, you have to fight for it. If you give bread away, you lose your freedom and bread together. So you have to make sure that you understand the values that you stand on.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are confused, and I absolutely agree. This is the biggest tragedy of our time, that people are
Right.
confused. They're confused about the values. They're confused about the reactions. If somebody comes to me and beats me up, I'll beat them back.
Mm-hmm.
It's normal. It's normal. You shouldn't be afraid doing this. You're not going to say, hey, hang on a second, here's a paper, and you can't beat me. You can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody takes your property away or your life away, what do you do? Nobody has the right to take your property or life away. Nobody.
Right.
So if somebody decides to do that, well, you have to fight. And it's just simple values that are taught through centuries and centuries and centuries. And I think because of that, people decided to have a civilized world, and we have progression. I mean, look at America. Everything's invented here. Everything's invented here. The best, everything comes from here. And it's only 300 million people, 350, let's say. China has billions. India has billions. So why is it not there?
Yeah.
Why is it here? Well, there is a value to that then. Then it means human brain, human behavior, human values, freedom creates the best way of life.
Right.
Just simple as that. It's just, you don't have to be a philosopher about it. It's just right there.
The power of individual.
Yeah.
Individualism.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Being individual, your freedom is guaranteed by God, not by country. That's just basically it. Your thought process is guaranteed by you, right? Because you create your thoughts. To materialize those thoughts into something good about you, that's the values, right? You go through the values. So you understand how to create something of your potential that's going to benefit somebody else. That's very important. I do this music this way. It's not about satisfying me. It's about making sure people are happy with that, right? So the same as this iPhone, I'm sure. I'm happy with that, even though it's annoying, but I'm happy with that. So the idea of individual value is to make sure that we all bloom as flowers in the field, and we have the right to do that. That's it. And if somebody bombs that field, what do?
Fight.
Fight. That's the only way. And as I said, we are in World War III. We are. Just the West is in denial.
Yeah.
Not the people, but the leaders. They are in denial. The other guy is bluffing a lot, but he kills a lot. So, and nobody's stopping him. Well, of course he'll be doing more.
He's not going to stop by himself unless he has to.
Right.
Exactly.
And
So
if this is very easy, well, then Lithuania would be very easy too.
easy.
Yeah.
Not a question.
Yeah, right.
Not a question.
This has happened before.
Many, many times. And, the people think, well, it's 21st century. Well, the people are the same. The same emotions and the same evil, the same good. It's all the same. Read any book. Why do we like movies? Because it's a story of good and evil.
Generally, yeah.
That's all it is. It all comes from religion books, either it's a Bible, either it's a Talmud or whatever. The Quran is the same stories of learning what's good and what's not good. That's all it is. It translated, that's why people go to movies and theaters and music. It's all telling the stories. And if people didn't learn anything from that stories, that's a tragedy. That's what the tragedy is. And right now, we're living in a real world disaster where we have to solve as human being based on the stories of good and evil to make sure that we're on the side of good. And the confusion is given right now that you don't know on which side you are, and that's a tragedy. To me, that's how the humanity will lose its humanity, how the civilization is going to be destroyed.
Okay. Well, Vlad, this has been a really thought-provoking conversation.
Definitely
And
was.
I really hope you're correct.
I've learned a lot too.
I hope that Putin is bluffing, and this thing will resolve somehow without losing a lot of Ukrainian people. So, and I hope that you can go back to a sovereign nation and rebuild, and it'll happen. Now, what I'd like you to do again is to give that address for your GoFundMe, because I want to make sure everybody hears that.
Yes. GoFundMe. It's a gofundme.com.
Okay.
/ and it's kind of numbers. It's 34ABBD85. Again, it's gofundme.com 34ABBD85.
Okay.
And they can find that on your social media sites
Yes.
too.
If you look at Vlad DeBriansky or Olena DeBriansky GoFundMe, you'll see.
Okay. And I'll put a link to that in the description of this video to make sure that they get to it. All right. So, guys, here's what you need to do. Since our leaders aren't able to make a decision, we can. And what we can do is we can give a little bit of our money. It's not going to hurt you. $10, $20. If we all gave that much, there's 336 million people in this country, and we could solve a humanitarian crisis that's happening in Ukraine and Poland right now.
It's an immediate crisis, or right now crisis.
Right. Yeah, so give up a couple of bucks, man. Let's make it happen. And we're Americans, and that's what we do, you know. We talk a lot about spreading freedom and prosperity in the world.
There's a whole lot more than just flying a new emoji or something on your Facebook profile. You can really make a difference.
Yeah, and if you're wondering what you can do as an individual, that's it. You know, that's the only thing you can do as an individual.
And if I could, I'd like to give a shout out to some friends in the band, the Ghost Wolves in Austin, Texas. I think it's a Venmo. You can find the Ghost Wolves on Facebook. They've got friends in Ukraine. They do a lot of European tours.
Okay.
And so look for them too. Ghost Wolves also have a link up on their website.
Yeah. And again, guys, be careful where you get your news. Not everything that we get is the truth either. So, look around and disseminate for yourself. I'm Hank Vatt. For Mark Hogan, this is Hank's Think Tank, and we're out.